Assalamu alaikum, dear students. From the course of human physiology, our recent topic under consideration and under discussion is blood. This is our first lecture today on blood, and in this lecture, we will study about physiology of blood. So let's start our today's lecture. What is blood? Blood is a constantly circulating fluid, providing the body with nutrition, oxygen, and waste removal. Blood is mostly liquid, with numerous cells and proteins suspended in it, making blood thicker as compared to pure water. The average person has about 5 liter blood in its body. It means that an average healthy person contains more than a gallon of blood in its whole body. Concentration and the amount of blood, it depends on the weight of a person. A liquid, which is called plasma, makes up about half of the content of blood. Actually, it makes 55% of the blood composition. Plasma contains proteins that help blood to clot, transport substances through the blood, and perform other functions. Blood plasma also contains glucose and other dissolved nutrients. About half of blood volume is composed of blood cells. Uh, for example, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. If we talk about their functions shortly, we will see that red blood cells, they carry oxygen to the tissues from lungs towards tissues, and white blood cells, which fight against infections, and platelets, they are smaller cells that help blood to clot. Blood is conducted through blood vessels. There are two types of blood vessels, arteries and veins. Blood is prevented from clotting in the blood vessels by their smoothness and the finely tuned balance of clotting factors. We will study in detail about clotting factors in next slides. If we talk about functions of blood, we can say that functions of blood, the major functions are to provide the body cells with oxygen and removes carbon dioxide from tissues towards lungs in order to exhale outside the body. Blood also absorbs oxygen from air in the lungs. It transports oxygen to cells throughout the body, and it removes waste carbon dioxide from the cells. So the most important function is to deliver oxygen and remove metabolic wastes. It also helps to maintain temperature, pH, and fluid volume because it's the largest fluid present in our body. It also protects from blood loss platelets with the help of platelets that perform the action of blood clotting. Blood also prevent infection, that is, it contains antibodies and white blood cells which fight against infections. And blood also help to transport hormones and nutrients. So if we talk about in detail, first of all, fluid connective tissue. Blood is a fluid connective tissue composed of 55% plasma and 45% formed elements, which includes red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, and other cells. Since these living cells are suspended in plasma, so we can say that blood is known as fluid connective tissue and not just fluid. Provides oxygen to the cells. Blood absorbs oxygen from lungs and transports it to different cells of the body, as we have already discussed. The waste carbon dioxide moves from blood to the lungs and is exhaled out. Transports hormones and nutrients. Transport hormones and nutrients. In this function, the digested nutrients such as glucose, vitamins, minerals, and proteins, they are absorbed into the blood through the capillaries and in the villi lining the small intestine. The hormones secreted by the endocrine glands, they are also transported with the help of blood towards different organs and tissues and muscles of our body. Homeostasis. Blood helps to maintain the internal body temperature by absorbing or releasing heat. We know that the optimum body temperature for a human being is 37 degrees, and that is maintained with the help of our blood. Blood clotting at site of injury. The platelets, the proteins present in the blood, they help in the clotting of blood at the site of injury. Platelets along with the fibrin. Fibrin is a form of protein which form clot at the wound site and block the blood loss, and also helps to block any type of infection that is possible to attack on our body. Transport of waste to the kidney and liver. Blood enters the kidney where it is filtered to remove nitrogenous waste out of the blood plasma. The toxin or toxic chemicals from the blood are also removed by the liver. Protection of the body against pathogens. The white blood cells, that is the blood cells, the major blood cells that fight against infections, they multiply rapidly during infections. To know more about blood, let's talk about its composition. If we talk about how many types of blood cells are present, we have seen that blood consists of cells which are known as elements, formed elements of blood. These cells have their own functions and roles to play in the body. The blood cells which circulate all around the body are of three types. Number one, red blood cells, or they are also known as erythrocytes. They are biconcave cells, as we can see here in this diagram. They are biconcave cells without nucleus in humans and are also known as erythrocytes. They don't contain any nucleus. Red blood cells contain the iron-rich protein which is called hemoglobin, and it's the hemoglobin which gives blood its red color. While red blood cells are the most copious blood cells which are produced in bone marrow. Their main function is to transport oxygen from and towards various tissues and organs. This diagram shows the red blood cells which are red due to the presence of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is a transport molecule and is also a pigment. So as a result, blood shows red color. Then comes white blood cells, or another name given leukocytes. Leukocytes, they are colorless body cells, and they are colorless because it is devoid of hemoglobin. That is, it does not contain any pigment or hemoglobin. They are further classified as granulocytes and agranulocytes. White blood cells mainly contribute to immunity and defense mechanism. So, if we talk about its types, we can see that there are five types of white blood cells, and there are five different types of blood cells, white blood cells, but they are classified mainly based on the presence and absence of granules. So we can say that there are two main types of white blood cells: granulocytes, which contain granules, and agranulocytes, which does not contain any type of granules. We can see here that there are two types, monocytes and lymphocytes, that does not contain any type of granules. So they are agranulocytes, while eosinophil, basophil, and neutrophil, they contain small granules as are shown in the diagram. So they are granulocytes. Granulocytes are actually leukocytes with the presence of granules in their cytoplasm. The granulated cells include eosinophil, basophil, and neutrophil. While agranulocytes, they are leukocytes with the absence of granules in their cytoplasm. So agranulocytes are further classified into monocytes and lymphocytes. And there is a third type of blood cell which is known as platelets or thrombocytes. The thrombocytes, they are specialized blood cells produced from bone marrow. They come into play when there is bleeding or hemorrhagic conditions, that is loss of blood. They help in clotting and coagulation of blood. Platelets help in coagulation during a cut or wound. Let's talk about composition of blood. We can see here that there are two major portions of blood. Plasma, 55% contains plasma, and 45% almost there are formed elements. There are three types of formed elements: leukocytes, white blood cells, erythrocytes, red blood cells, or platelets. While if we talk about leukocytes, we have already seen that there are two main types of leukocytes: granulocytes, which contain neutrophils, basophils, and eosinophils, and agranulocytes, which contain lymphocytes and monocytes. So if we talk about plasma and if we look upon its composition, we can see here that there are major biomolecules which are present in the plasma. That is, plasma contains amino acids, nitrogenous waste, electrolytes, nutrients, proteins, gases. While in proteins, the most important proteins that includes they are albumin, fibrinogen, and globulins. And all these proteins, they have very important role in the process of blood clotting. Let's talk about the types of blood vessels. Let's talk some about plasma. What is plasma? The liquid state of blood that can be contributed to plasma, as it makes 55% blood. It's pale yellow in color, and when separated from blood cells, it consists of just salts, nutrients, water, and enzymes. So blood plasma also contains important proteins and other components which are necessary for overall health. Hence, we can say that blood plasma transfusions are given to patients with liver failure and life-threatening injuries. While we have already discussed about red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets in last slides. Blood vessels. Let's talk about blood vessels. There are different types of blood vessels in our body, each carrying out specialized functions. They are categorized into arteries, veins, and capillaries. We can see here arteries that carry oxygenated blood, veins that carry deoxygenated blood, and hence the color blue is given to veins, and capillaries. So there are three types of blood vessels. If we talk about arteries that carry oxygenated blood, they are strong tubes and muscular in nature. These blood vessels carry oxygen-rich blood from the heart to all the tissues of the body, while aorta is one of the main arteries that arise from the heart and branches further. While talking about veins, we can say here that they are elastic blood vessels which carry deoxygenated blood from all parts of the body and transport towards heart. An exception is in both artery and vein is the umbilical and the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood to the heart from the lungs to the heart, and the umbilical vein carries oxygenated blood from placenta to the fetus. Similarly, there is an exception in case of artery, that is the pulmonary artery that carry deoxygenated blood from heart towards lungs. Now let's talk about capillaries. On reaching tissues, arteries branch further into extremely thin tubes. As we can see here, they are called capillaries. Capillaries bring about the exchange of substances between blood and tissues. Hence, they provide a large surface area as compared to the artery. There is another type known as sinusoids. Sinusoids are a special type of wider capillaries present in bone marrow, liver, lymph nodes, spleen, and some endocrine glands. They may be continuous, discontinuous, or fenestrated sinusoids. While if we talk about the layers of blood vessels or the composition of blood vessels, we can see that both arteries and veins, they consist of three layers: tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica externa. Tunica intima, the internal layer, here the internal one, the name is not labeled here. It is one of the innermost and thinnest layer of arteries and veins. It comprises endothelial cells and they are in direct contact with the flow of blood. While the second one, the medium one, it's the tunica media. It's the middle layer of an artery or vein, and tunica media is made up of smooth muscle cells, the epithelial cells, the tissues, and the smooth muscle cells. While the third one, tunica externa, it surrounds tunica media and it is made up of collagen and connective tissues. It is also supported by the elastic lamina in arteries. We can see here that approximately blood makes approximately 8% of the body weight. Average volume in healthy adult male is 5 to 6 liter per body, while in female it is 4 to 5 liter in a body, in a healthy adult female. What is a hemocrite? Hematocrit is the percent of erythrocytes or the red blood cell volume to the total blood volume. While normal hematocrit value in a healthy male, it is 47%, while in female it is 42%. It means that around 47% in a male, they are red blood cells and remaining they are other cells. And normal pH of blood, it ranged between 7.35 and 7.45. Let's talk about in detail. Let's talk about blood plasma composition in detail. We know that blood plasma makes 55% of the total blood, out of which plasma, it's 90% is water, while remaining 10% contains some proteins. That is almost 8% out of 10% is protein. There are three main types of protein. The first one, albumin, that makes 60% of the total protein content of the plasma. Albumin is produced by the liver and maintain osmotic pressure and helps to transport hormones and enzymes. The second one is globulins, the larger molecule as compared to the albumin, as compared in terms of molecular size. There are two types of globulins, alpha and beta globulin. Both types are produced by the liver and are used to transport lipids, metals, and fat-soluble vitamins. There is also a third type known as gamma globulins. They are basically antibodies which are released by plasma cells in response to immune response. And the third one is fibrinogens. Almost 4% of the total protein is made up by fibrinogen. Globulins are 30% and albumin is 60% of the total protein content of the blood. Fibrinogen is also produced by the liver and form fibrin fibers of blood clot and helps in blood coagulation. While apart from proteins, blood also contains gas. We know that blood is very helpful in order to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide from lungs and towards lungs. So there are also some electrolytes like sodium, potassium, calcium that also these electrolytes also take part in order to make sodium, potassium, and calcium channels in order to help the process of transportation of nutrients. Also, there are some magnesium, chloride, sulfate, and bicarbonate ions. So these ions help to maintain plasma osmotic pressure and pH of the blood. There are some organic nutrients which are also present in the blood. For example, carbohydrates, amino acids, lipids, and vitamins. Hormones. Blood helps to carry hormones and transport hormones uh, from their cell of origin towards their target tissues. So steroid and thyroid hormones are basically carried by plasma proteins. And in terms of metabolic waste, carbon dioxide, plasma contains carry carbon dioxide, urea, uric acid, creatinine, and ammonium salts. Remaining buffy coat is less than 1%, which contains platelets and leukocytes. Hence, the diagram shows. Let's talk about erythrocytes in detail. What are erythrocytes? They are red blood cells, cellular component of blood, and millions of which uh, take part in the circulation of vertebrates and give blood its characteristic red color and carry oxygen from lungs towards tissues. The mature human red blood cell is small, round, and biconcave, as shown in the diagram. It appears dumbbell shaped in profile. The cell is flexible and takes a bell shape as it passes through extremely small blood vessels. So its shape is bell shaped. It is covered with a membrane composed of lipids and proteins, and it does not contain any nucleus in it, but contain hemoglobin pigment. Hemoglobin is a red iron rich protein which helps to bind oxygen, and hemoglobin is converted to oxyhemoglobin when it binds with oxygen. And we can see that its diameter is 7.5 micrometer. It's enucleate and have essentially no organelles and contains 97% of hemoglobin, while it also contains some antioxidant enzymes that rid the body of harmful oxygen radicals. Talking about its functions, the function of red blood cell and its hemoglobin is to carry oxygen from lungs or gills like in fish to all the body tissues, and to carry carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of metabolism, towards lungs where it is excreted out and exhaled out. In invertebrates, now we are talking about invertebrates, oxygen carrying pigment is carried free in the plasma. Its concentration in red blood cells in vertebrates is so high so that oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged as gases. So it is more efficient and represents an important evolutionary development in vertebrates as compared to invertebrates. The mammalian red cell is further adapted by lacking a nucleus, while the amount of oxygen which is carried by the cell for its own metabolism is very low, and most oxygen carried can be freed and can be released into the tissues. The biconcave shape of the red blood cell allows oxygen exchange at a constant rate. The red blood cells develops in bone marrow in several stages. From a hemocytoblast, which is a multipotential cell in the mesenchyma, it becomes an erythroblast. During the 2 to 5 days of development, the erythroblast gradually fills with hemoglobin and its nucleus and mitochondria disappear here. In a late stage, the cell is called a reticulocyte, which ultimately becomes a fully matured red blood cell. The life of average red blood cell in human is 100 to 120 days approximately, while there are some 5.2 million red blood cells per cubic millimeter of blood in the adult human. So, though red blood cells, they are usually round, but a small portion of them are in oval shape in a normal person. And in certain hereditary traits, a higher portion may be oval. Some diseases also display red cells of abnormal shape. For example, in case of pernicious anemia, or crescent shaped in sickle cell anemia, and with projections giving a thorny appearance in another disorder, which is a hereditary disorder and is known as acanthocytosis. And the number of red blood cells and the amount of hemoglobin also vary among different individuals and under different conditions. So the number is higher, for example, in person who live at high altitude and in the disease of anemia. At birth, the red cell count is high, while it falls shortly after birth and gradually rises to the adult level at puberty. There are some info regarding erythrocytes. Hemoglobin is a quaternary structure. We will see in detail in next slides. It leaks mitochondria because they generate ATP by anaerobic mechanism. Therefore, they do not consume any of the oxygen they carry, but they transport all 100% oxygen towards tissues. Our red blood cell contains 280 million hemoglobin molecules on average, while lifespan is 100 to 120 days, and they are then destroyed in the spleen, which is also known as red blood cell graveyard. Men contain approximately 4.7 to 6.1 million cells per microliter, depending upon the weight and the volume of blood, and women contain 4.2 to 5.4 million cells per microliter. Erythrocytes are the major factor contributing to blood viscosity. When the number of erythrocytes increases beyond the normal range, blood becomes more viscous and flows more slowly. When the number of erythrocytes drops below the lower end of the range, it means that the blood becomes thin and flows more rapidly. Now comes leukocytes, that is white blood cells. They are also called leukocytes with the presence of granules in their cytoplasm and also without granules in the cytoplasm. There are two types of leukocytes. The granulated cell include eosinophil, basophil, and neutrophil. On average, there are almost 4,800 to 10,800 white blood cells. On average, there are 4,800 to 10,800 white blood cells per microliter of blood. You can notice the large quantity of white blood cells that are present in our blood. That is almost 10,800 white blood cells per microliter, 1 microliter of blood. They are grouped into two major categories on the basis of structure and chemical characteristics, known as granulocytes that contain membrane-bound cytoplasmic granules that are present in the cytoplasm, and agranulocytes that lay the granules, obvious granules. Now, we have already seen in last slides that there are three types of white blood cells which are granulocytes and two types of white blood cells which are agranulocytes. Let's discuss in detail about their structure. Granulocytes, they include neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. They have lobed nuclei. Functionally, all granulocytes are phagocytes to some degree. Here are the diagrams, the grammatic representation of granulocytes and agranulocytes. We can observe clearly that inside the granulocytes, there are obvious granules that are present inside the cytoplasm. Like in neutrophil, multi-lobed nucleus, pale red and blue cytoplasmic granule. The point to be noted here that red blood cells does not contain any nucleus, while white blood cells contain an obvious nucleus. Eosinophil
that contains bilobed nucleus. Red cytoplasmic granules are present here, and basophil. Bilobed nucleus and purplish black cytoplasmic granules are present inside the basophils. And lymphocyte, which are relatively small in size and contain large spherical, this one, the dark blue color, large spherical nucleus and is a thin rim of pale blue cytoplasm, but there are no granules. While in the monocytes, they are kidney shaped, they have kidney shaped nucleus and abundant pale blue cytoplasm is present here. First of all, neutrophils, also called polymorphonuclear leukocytes, and account for 50 to 70% of the white blood cell population, about twice as large as erythrocytes. They are normally found in the bloodstream and are predominant cells which are present in pus mainly. As we can see here that there are 70% of white blood cells are present of the total white blood cell production. So they are normally present in the pus. Around 75% of white blood cells, they are neutrophils but with a diameter of 10 to 12 micrometer on average. And their nucleus is 2 to 5 lobed, and the cytoplasm has very fine granules. So neutrophil helps in the destruction of bacteria with lysosomes, and it acts as a strong oxidant. Neutrophils are stained only using natural dyes, hence they are called, so the natural, from the word natural, they are known as neutrophils. Neutrophils are also the first cells of the immune system to respond to an invader such as bacteria or a virus, that is any particle that attacks from outside environment on the body. So the neutrophils are the first one to attack on the invaders or the attacking material. The lifespan of white blood cells, especially for neutrophils, it extends for up to 8 hours and is produced every day in the bone marrow and are destroyed daily. Their number increases mainly during acute bacterial infection. Some of their granules contain hydrolytic enzymes and are regarded as lysosomes also, while others, especially the smaller granule that contain an antimicrobial protein which is called defensins, that pierce holes in the membrane of the pathogens. So in this way, they degrade the pathogens and destroy them. They also kill pathogens by respiratory burst, that is by using cell metabolized oxygen to produce germ-like oxidizing substance such as bleach or hydrogen peroxide. Moreover, neutrophils, they are chemically attracted to sites of the inflammation and are active phagocytes. While in case of absence of any infection or inflammation, their number is much less as compared to the presented here. In case of eosinophils, they account for 2 to 4% only of all leukocytes. So it means that they are in very less amount. They are in very less quantity. They are present in very less amount in the white blood cells. Their granules are lysosome-like and filled with a unique variety of digestive enzymes. They are the cells of actually leukocyte which are present in the immune system also. But these cells are responsible for fighting infections in especially in parasites of vertebrates and for controlling mechanisms associated with allergy and asthma. Eosinophil cells are small granulocytes which are produced in the bone marrow and makes 2 to 3% just of whole white blood cell, as we have already seen in this slide. These cells are present in high concentrations in the digestive tract. They lack enzymes that specially digest bacteria, and their most important role is to lead the counterattack against parasitic worms such as flatworms, like tapeworms and flukes, and also roundworms, that is hookworm, which are also known as hookworms. That they are too large to be phagocytized. So because of this reason, because of their logic to attack on worms, their quantity is much less as compared to the neutrophils, only 2 to 4%. They release the enzymes from their cytoplasmic granules onto the parasite surface to digest it. Eosinophils have complex role in many other diseases, including allergies and asthma especially. Now comes the basophils. They are the least common of the granulocytes, ranging from just 0.5 to 1% of white blood cells. They contain large cytoplasmic granules, which play a vital role in mounting a non-specific immune response to pathogens and allergic reaction by releasing histamine. An allergic reaction by releasing histamine and dilating the blood vessels. These white blood cells have the ability to be stained when exposed to basic dyes, hence referred to as basophil due to basic dyes. And these cells are best known for their role in asthma and they result in inflammation and also bronchoconstriction in the airways. They also secrete serotonin, histamine, and heparin. Then comes the agranulocytes. They include lymphocytes and monocytes and lack visible cytoplasmic granules. If we talk about in detail about lymphocytes, they play a vital role in producing antibodies, especially, and their size ranges from 8 to 10 micrometers. They are commonly known as natural killer cells. They play an important role in body defense. These white blood cells are the colorless cells formed in lymphoid tissue, hence referred to as lymphocytes. There are two main types of lymphocytes. Lymphocytes, T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. These cells are very important in the immune system and are responsible for cell-mediated immunity and humoral immunity. And they make up to 25% of the total white blood population. If we look into the T cells, they function in the immune response by acting directly against virus infected cells and tumor cells. While in case of B cells or B lymphocytes, they give rise to plasma cells which produce antibodies. If we talk about monocytes, these cells usually have a large bilobe nucleus with a diameter of 12 to 20 micrometers. So they are largest in size in the white blood cells, but they count only 3 to 8% of the white blood cells. The nucleus is generally half moon shaped or kidney shaped, and it occupies 6 to 8% of white blood cells. When circulating, monocytes leave the bloodstream and enter the tissue. They differentiate into highly mobile macrophages. Macrophages are actively phagocytic, and they are crucial in the body's defense against viruses, certain intracellular bacterial parasites, and chronic infections such as tuberculosis. We can say that they play an important role in the body defense. These white blood cells are colorless cells. They formed in lymphoid tissue, hence referred to as lymphocytes specially, due to the presence in the lymphoid tissue. They are the monocytes. They are garbage trucks of the immune system. We can say them. The most important function of monocytes are to migrate into the tissues and clean up dead cells, protect against blood-borne pathogens, and move very quickly to the sites of infection in the tissues. These white blood cells have a single bean-shaped nucleus, hence referred to as monocytes, due to presence of a single nucleus. Here comes the last, but not the least, platelets, also known as thrombocytes. They are specialized blood cells produced from bone marrow, and platelets come into play when there is bleeding or hemorrhage conditions. They help in clotting and coagulation of blood. So platelets help in coagulation during a cut or a wound.